All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on day 2 of the virtual Precision Ag Conference and Ag Technology Showcase. Over 400 people have registered for the event so far, and to share their passion for precision agriculture and all things ag tech. Our first presentation this morning is from John Hartnett. John is the founder and CEO of Thrive Agri-Food, a leading agri-food innovation ecosystem. It works with top agriculture, food, and technology corporations, universities, and investors to solve the biggest challenges facing the food and agriculture industries. Thrive has a community of over 5,000 startups from 100 countries, and the platform invests and accelerates and creates unparalleled access for entrepreneurs to scale globally. Before John begins his presentation this morning, we have a series of quick polls. The first question was already posted in an announcement this morning in the platform, and also is posted on the chat on the right-hand side of the session. So if you haven't had a chance to answer that poll, if you could do that now, that would be great. We'll also be posting the second question shortly. So if you can answer both poll questions, that would be greatly appreciated, and we'll be sharing the poll results with you later on in the presentation. As with all of our presentations, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat on the side, and we'll get to those when we can at the end after John's finished presenting. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to share a video with everyone about Thrive. And then after that, John will start his presentation.
My name is John Hartnett. I'm CEO and founder of SVG Ventures and Thrive. We're an innovation and investment platform based in Silicon Valley, and we're focused on the agri-food tech sector. Our Thrive Accelerator is the #1 agri-food accelerator in the world. We work with over 5,000 startups in 100 countries. We have been doing this for 6 years and have graduated 6 cohorts around the world. And those startups have created almost $1 billion in value. We also work with over 40 corporations and 5,000 farmers, identifying technologies to transform their business and accelerate their innovation and growth strategy through investment and acquisition. We run major agri-food events around the world with global partners like Forbes Media. And these are key agri-food events that are bringing our ecosystem together, our corporations, our farmers, our investors, and startups.
We like the idea of Thrive and its ability to really take an incubated idea and build it into a business.
People have great ideas around the world, and what they've done a really nice job of is convince these folks, 1, to come and interact with us, 2, to listen to our problems so they can then adopt and adapt their technology or their solution to our problems. And it's going to make change and improvement and sustainability move ahead much more quickly for our industry. And so Thrive helps bridge that gap between the know-how in Silicon Valley and the application here with growers in the Salinas Valley and growers around the world.
We've been working with Thrive for a couple of years, and we've just really been impressed with the ecosystem that they've built. Their global reach, the quality of innovators and entrepreneurs, the investors that come, the industry partners. This is really a terrific long-term partnership that we're excited to support.
It is really something that you couldn't get on your own as a startup. There's just no way you could facilitate that type of networking and that type of opportunity without someone like Thrive. And I think they just do it best.
So with further ado, everyone, I'm going to let John get us started this morning. We asked him to talk about how innovation is advancing the future of agriculture. John? Oops.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody, and greetings from Silicon Valley. It's a rainy day here in California, so we're actually delighted to be able to see the rain for the first time. Let me just share my screen, and I will, hopefully you can see this okay. So as I mentioned, we're based here in Silicon Valley, and we have an investment arm called SVG Ventures, and we also run an accelerator called Thrive. one of the things that we dealt with very early on is that the world of agriculture, technology, and innovation weren't all naturally sitting together, and it was quite fragmented. And we wanted to kind of bring the ecosystem together. I think you hear a lot about ecosystems as a buzzword, but it's so important to bring farmers close to entrepreneurs and innovators, and also to bring research from universities and from research organizations into the field to prove out those technologies, and also bringing investors and also bringing major corporations that are in the food and agriculture space together. So that was really a big focus of what we wanted to do to do this, and it's something that we want to help drive forward also in Canada. Just in terms of, you probably saw some of the details there in terms of our, I guess, credentials. We're the #1 ag tech accelerator in the world. We're the most active investor in ag tech. We invest in early stage emerging technologies across the whole ag tech supply chain. And also we work with major corporations and over 5,000 startups from around the world. Earlier this year, we were delighted to launch the innovation agenda, or the innovation imperative, with Secretary Perdue in DC. Obviously pre-COVID, we did this in February, and really driving the goals around producing more with less, managing the environment, sustainability, reducing food waste. So these are key areas that we've been focused on. In terms of technologies that we've experienced, one of the areas around controlled environment farming or vertical farming is something that's come in the attention of investors, and also starting to kind of grow and scale. Just probably about 2 months ago, we announced a relationship that we had been working with Plenty, which is a San Francisco-based controlled environment farming organization, and Driscoll Berries. Driscoll Berries are about a $4 billion berry company, biggest in the world. And this was quite a move. We've been working with Driscoll's for several years, and they wanted to really kind of take a leap into the future of agriculture. And we announced this deal. We've been working on this for about a year. It also resulted in about $140 million investment. I think that this is an area for the future. I don't see it's going to replace traditional farming, but I do feel it's going to be incremental in terms of being able to solve some of the challenges in key areas. Another area that we'd worked with is around bringing the ecosystem together. You can't build relationships if you can't meet people. So doing major events and bringing farmers, leaders in investment and agriculture together. That's why we did a partnership with Forbes Media about 7 years ago to create the first Forbes Ag Tech Summit. And just last year, you'll be delighted to know that the winner of our event last year was a Calgary-based entrepreneur and a company called Livestock Water Recycle. And there's Karen there getting her award last year. She also featured at the Forbes 30 Under 30. So it was a great opportunity, for her. We see many entrepreneurs around the world. We've run over 6 cohorts. We have over 5,000 startups. And, we're delighted to launch this in Canada. We've been investing in Canadian startups for the last couple of years. But we really wanted to put a greater focus on finding some of the best technologies that can solve the agriculture challenges in Canada, and also bring entrepreneurs from outside of Canada to help farmers solve some of the key challenges that they're dealing with. And this Canadian challenge we launched a couple of months ago, and today we're getting major applications coming in from entrepreneurs across Canada. So if there's any entrepreneurs in the audience, please check this out. We'd love to meet with you, and we're delighted to work with some of the biggest leaders in Canada. Obviously, you're very familiar with the likes of Nutrien, but obviously major players, obviously like FCC and other partners as well. Why is this ag tech revolution happening? Why suddenly are we seeing all these different new innovations certainly over the course of the last 3 to 5 years, it's really accelerated. And a big driver is obviously, we've got to produce more with less. We're going to have 10 billion people on the planet, $2.5 billion people more to feed. That's obviously placing significant demand on the supply chain. And in addition to that, there's also a changing demographic, which is also putting even greater challenges to the agriculture community. I think, as you all know, anybody that's in the farming industry, it's not easy. We already have significant challenges in terms of water scarcity, labor, cost of labor. The availability of labor has not got better; it's got worse. Arable land, shortages around the world. There's probably 50% less arable land than there was 50 years ago. And then, it's hard to imagine in the current, 21st century, we're dealing with major food safety issues, whether it's E. coli breakouts, et cetera. So these are all like massive issues that the agriculture industry, are dealing with. And I mentioned earlier, the demographics are changing. 50% of today's population are, millennial or Gen Z. That's a whole new customer that is consuming food in a different way than, the 50-something-year-olds that maybe I am. And, they're very much aware of health, nutrition, taste is always very important, but they're also very aware of the impact to the planet and the impact it's going to have in terms of sustainability. So there's an increased awareness in this. We've been talking about sustainability for years and a lot of hand waving in this space, but this is now becoming more center stage, with young consumers, and their ability to be able to embrace brands is going to be based on the quality of those brands and the sustainability of the products that come through that supply chain. I think, as we've seen, this has even been amplified more in the current COVID situation. Consumers, whether it's in the US or around the world, they want to know where their food is coming from. They're trusting brands, and those brands need to deliver on the quality of the food. And health and sustainability continues to rank very highly in consumers' minds and their wallets, I guess, when they're going shopping. COVID, I'm here in my home. I would love to be with you in a live event today, but COVID has really, changed our world in not just the immediate situation that we find ourselves in, but probably for the rest of our lives. This has accelerated certain technologies. If you look at your home now is a new place. It's not just a place where you live, it's the place where you work. It's the place where you're dining in and having your food. It's the place where you're shopping. And that's accelerated, key areas in the area of obviously digital marketing, our digital marketplaces, online buying, et cetera. So you're seeing these companies, whether they're digital marketplaces or the likes of Amazon, their businesses have been booming and continue to boom in this scenario. I think it's also uncovered some of the challenges in the food supply chain. Certainly here in the US, we saw some major issues and gaps around the meat packing areas. This has put greater emphasis on how can innovation, solve some of these problems. It's also accelerated, touchless operations, whether it's robotics, automation, AI. So we're seeing this acceleration happening, and also the adoption and innovation. And when you look at these challenges that farmers are faced with in terms of the growing population and dealing with these kind of challenges, we just can't keep doing the same as we've been doing for 100+ years. We have to innovate. We have to find new solutions. We just can't keep trying to drive a dollar out here, and try to save here. It's really going to be something that's going to be transformative. And that's why we've been focused on ag tech and the whole agri-food technology area, because it's so critical. It's so critical to every country. It's so critical to every individual in the supply chain. The food supply chain is about a $7.8 trillion industry, one of the biggest and most important supply chains in the world. And there's no other supply chain as important as the one that puts food on our family table. So critical, in many ways. And what we do, and we'll give you a flavor, of this. Every year we run both an accelerator program, but we also evaluate all these technology companies that are springing up in terms of solving challenges around labor, farm management, areas around robotics, automation, and we go through over like 5,000 companies, and we pick out the best companies, there. And one of the things that we do here is really try to kind of see exactly where are these companies making the biggest impact, whether it's in the field, whether it's in logistics, whether it's in, at a retail level, et cetera. So we look at, this and these companies and map them, to the supply chain. The areas that we've seen kind of the biggest increase and where a lot of the investment goes. So our Thrive Top 50 is linked to these companies that are being the most successful, that have probably raised the highest numbers in terms of venture capital investment. And you're seeing some key trends come here. I mean, biotechnology and science has always been a key driver of innovation in agriculture, and will continue to be, and therefore you see companies like Indigo Ag and Zimmergen, playing key areas here. I mean, one of the things that has happened in the last few years is the whole area of next generation proteins. Companies like Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, etc. They're going after that young millennial customer that that I shared with you earlier, that cares about the planet, and therefore they're going after the livestock industry, pretty strongly. So this is a trend that is not going to stop, and you're going to see this kind of disruption, happening across the whole next generation proteins, area. In addition, I would say that management of your information. If you don't have data, if you are not managing, you can't manage a business. You have to have the data, whether it's the data in your Excel spreadsheet managing your financials, or whether it's the data that you're managing your inputs, or you're managing your farm, your labor, etc. So data is becoming very, very important. And you're seeing companies like Farmers Business Networks really kind of gathering data to be able to help farmers make the smartest decisions. At the same time, that's controversial. Who feels comfortable about giving their data away if it's not properly secure, etc. So it's an area that will continue to grow. One of the interesting things that we've seen in the last few months is that Google now have just announced an entry into the whole data area with their, it's called Mineral. This will be interesting to see how this is actually going to play out. And then, the next area I mentioned earlier is controlled environment ag. What if, field to fork doesn't have to be from the field? What about if it's from the city? If you're, eating berries, and this is something that we're working with Driscoll Berries. Some of these berries are grown in central Mexico, and they have to find their way to a consumer in New York or Chicago or San Francisco. That's a 5 to 8 day journey. So what if you have that farm where you're able to grow even more flavorful berries, but in closer to the consumer? So I think this is going to be a revolution. I think it's going to be a really big thing, for the future. Is it going to take away from, mainstream row crop growing? Not at all. I just think it's going to be incremental, and it's going to help solve some of the gaps that are there. And then, finally, some of the next areas around robotics, automation. This is something that we've seen a lot of here in California, particularly with the labor crisis that we've gone through. Farmers are, really struggling, and growers are really struggling leaving fruit on the trees because they can't get labor. So the adoption of robotics and automation has been accelerated. And we've probably invested and worked with probably about 8 to 10 different robotics automation companies. These are not just dumb machines that are out in the field. These are machines that have artificial intelligence to be able to identify either weeding or identifying issues in the field. So it's a smart device. You're going to see more and more of this take place. I think you're going to probably see more smart machines in volume versus say these big, huge, traditional, machinery that you see. This is just the latest in terms of venture capital going into ag tech. So it's not just kind of a fad. It's not just a thing that's that's happening and is going to go away. I think it's here to stay. When we started back in 2012, 2013, venture capital investment, which is the risk capital that goes into these startup companies from around the world, was about $1.5–2 billion in investment. Last year, it was about 8.3 billion. So it's grown substantially in this period. And this year, we're all sitting at our homes, and it's a really tough year for everybody, both personally and from a business perspective. But at the same time, the first half this year is tracking to be even a bigger year, for ag tech. So this is probably, being driven by some of the trends that COVID is even driving even further. So you can see this investment, across ag tech. I mean, this is an old slide that, obviously I'm based here in Silicon Valley, surrounded by companies like Google and the likes of Apple and, all these hot companies that have changed our worlds, whether it's the smartphone that we use every day, or whether it's the Google search that we use every day to find out information. And that's kind of changed our lives. It wasn't always that way. The biggest companies in the world were probably more on the energy side. And, what if we were to look forward into the future of what will be the biggest companies and who will be the most dominant companies in the agriculture sector in 2030? This is, our view of this kind of same chart. It's maybe a little bit, I'm not saying it's exactly going to be like this, but I can tell you that, you're going to see some of these technology companies playing a much greater interest in agriculture. And I think that's a good thing. And I think the likes of Amazon and Google have already started this. I know Microsoft have been working on their Farm Beats platform, but I think there's going to be new players that are going to enter the market, whether it's, on the next generation proteins, whether it's an Impossible Foods or Beyond Meat, or whether it's on the bioscience area with companies like Indigo or controlled environment farming. These could be the next generation of companies that could be the big changers, for the agriculture industry. And, I think that the agriculture big corporations are sitting up paying attention, whether it's, the Bayers, the BASFs, the John Deeres, Nutrients, Cortevas. They're looking outside their four walls for innovation. They're not just doing it all internally. And for them to be able to survive, through the next decade or couple of decades, innovation is going to play a key role. And, innovation is going to play a key role for all of us. And, the great thing with this industry, that we all work in is, there is a greater purpose in terms of what we're doing, in terms of, the health of the planet, the health of the soil. We're affecting people's lives in terms of what we do and how we grow and how we deliver. So therefore, innovation is going to continue to play a great role. And that's something that, gets us excited, makes us passionate about what we're doing. We love seeing more entrepreneurs. We every year we go through and evaluate all these technologies. We're now going into Thrive 7. These are the 6 cohorts that we go through. And, we've probably over 500 companies from around the world that want to come onto our program, and they're going to be companies that are going to change the world in some way. So it's an exciting time for agriculture. It's a tough time for agriculture, obviously, in the current environment, but if we're not innovating, it's going to be super hard to try and solve some of these challenges doing the same things the same way. And I guess I'll leave my talk there. So thank you for that conversation. I know that Denise is going to have a chat in terms of either any questions or areas that we want to chat about.
Great, thank you very much, John. I do have a couple of questions. One, just before we go on to some of the questions related specifically to the presentation, you did mention the Thrive challenge that you have on the go. We've posted a link for more information. We've also posted information in the files, but I thought maybe you could just touch a little bit more on what that is in Canada, and how people can participate and how they can get involved.
Yeah, so the Canadian challenge is really for us. We want to find the best entrepreneurs across Canada, and whether they're in universities or whether they're entrepreneurs working, developing a new technology that's trying to solve some of the challenges in the agriculture sector. And you know, the reason that we're doing a specific Canadian challenge is that, you know, for the last 2 years we've seen some really great companies come through from Canada. So therefore we wanted to put more emphasis right across, you know, right across Canada. And obviously for any entrepreneur, you know, we'll be making investment of $100,000. You know, they've got come onto our program for 4 months. They get to meet customers in terms of the farmers that we work with, the corporations that we work with. They get an opportunity to get showcased at the Forbes AgTech Summit. So it's a great opportunity. And, you know, last year it was won by a Calgary-based company. So, you know, you have a good track record already.
Yeah, that's good news. We're always very proud of our Canadians. We know we do well. With regard to some of the slides in your presentation, one of the questions that I had was, as a result of the global pandemic, what ag and food industry trend do you think became the most accelerated? I know there were trends already, but as a result of the pandemic itself, what do you think became more accelerated because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I mentioned a little bit of this. I mean, obviously, if you look closer to the consumer, you know, food delivery, online delivery, you know, has accelerated, I would say, by 5 years. You know, it's you know, like this is a significant, you know, move forward. If I look through the supply chain, I think the heightened awareness in terms of food safety and some of the areas that got exposed, you're starting to see companies now look at digital transformation and also robotics automation. You know, if you have, you know, less, you know, touch points in the process, you're minimizing, you know, the exposure there. So we're seeing a lot more activity in the whole robotics area, you know, as well. And I think that also goes into the field. Certainly here in California, you know, labor has already been a challenge, but in the COVID, you know, pandemic, picking strawberries or picking fruit or vegetables, you know, it still has to happen. And you're now seeing an adoption of more robotics and automation in there. So they would be the three biggest ones, that, you know, that we've seen, you know, across the board.
Okay. I thought maybe now, if it's all right, John, I might share the results of the first poll question.
Yeah.
Because I think they might have results that might surprise everyone. So
Okay.
Give me 2 secs. Oops. Yep. Sorry, everybody. So the results were that the participants believe the biggest challenge isn't the actual connectivity problems, which is a huge issue in rural US and rural Canada, but actually the learning curve.
Yeah.
And it's the learning curve for farmers to learn how to integrate all this data, learn how to integrate all this information and make business decisions. You talked about it a bit during the presentation.
Yeah.
Do you have any insights on, you know, like just small things that farmers can do, but what the industry can do overall?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by this. We did something similar type poll a few weeks ago here in the US. Same thing came out, and I think right now, I mean, like I've obviously been in the depths of all these different technologies, and even with that, it's a challenge to try and navigate through all these thousands of different startups and new technologies, and I think right now farmers are overwhelmed, you know, with the different solutions that are out there. and they need education. You know, like every big company has an IT department, or they have, you know, an organization that's able to support them. That's not the case in every single farm. You know, obviously big farms, you know, are well equipped. I think there needs to be either government-based or a place to go for farmers to be able to find information. You know, not just to kind of see, oh, show me, you know, 100 or 500 different companies. Show me the top 10. You know, so kind of like the quantification and the qualification of what's the best solution to use. Farmers need to know that, and I think, you know, there's so much regulation across the food sector. There's so much regulation across the agriculture sector, yet all these new technologies are kind of like unregulated. I'm not asking for regulation, but farmers need to kind of know, okay, what's the best solution I could put in place for a robotic, and they need to have a go-to place. And if it's not government-based, it's an opportunity for some of the farm associations to be able to collaborate there. And that's something we're actually very interested in this, to be able to, because we have a lot of the information, and it's something that we'd be interested in collaborating with the industry to be able to provide us insights in terms of what to use and where to use it.
Okay. Then I'll switch back kind of
Okay.
presentation mode. You talked about robotics. You talked a little bit already about how COVID has accelerated things from a robotics perspective. You talked about working with Driscoll and the raspberries and strawberries. Do you have any more insights about the robotics and how, you know, we've seen in the agriculture industry in particular, automated tractors that are operating without a human in them, those kinds of things. What else might we see in that perspective from robotics in agriculture?
Yeah, I think you're going to see like the big players, the John Deere's, the Kubotas, you know, their mainstream business is going to continue to get automated. But I think you're going to see a new generation of either swarm robotics or smaller, you know, useful, you know, robotics. Like there was a company that we brought through a few years ago called Burrow. And it's literally like a small little robot that follows you around in the field, just like a dog would follow you. And you can put your machinery or your, you know, your fruit, etc. on it, and it'll go back and bring it back to your farm. Like simple things like that, you know, you're going to see, you know, happen. We've worked with a company called Tortuga. They're picking strawberries. So, you know, picking strawberries isn't kind of like, you know, a huge machine. It's a very delicate and focused machine. And then, you know, companies like Soft Robotics, who've been getting a lot more attention, more on the supply chain side. You know, they're working with the likes of Taylor Farms, which are a big, you know, fresh food, $4 billion fresh food company here in the US in vegetables. You know, the production line, being able to softly pick up the produce without damaging is important. So, you know, you're going to see things like that, simple weeding devices, you know, not a big, huge, but very important in terms of being able to weed. So I think you're going to see a series of different, you know, kind of the Swiss Army knife of robotics starting to kind of play out over the next couple of years.
Okay, I like that one, Swiss Army knife. I thought I'd share the second survey results. So if everybody can bear with me once again. So what will be the largest driver? And the answer was, everybody thinks it's profitability. So not sure, ease of customer use, cost reduction, they were up there too, but certainly everybody thinks the driver is always profitability, right? Our own bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, farms are businesses and they have to make money. If they're not making money, they can't meet the bills. And, you know, ultimately, if you're going to adopt anything into your business, it's not going to be the adoption of, oh, it's easy to use, or it's going to be about how can I reduce, is this going to reduce the use of inputs? Is it going to reduce, you know, water usage? Is it going to reduce labor usage? So I think it, you know, this is such a key thing. And I think this is where some entrepreneurs struggle a little bit with, you know, they're kind of selling the excitement of a technology and the ease of use of a technology. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't save any money, you're not going to use it. And I'm not surprised by that. But interesting, you can see number two, it needs to be something that is easy to use. Don't give me a complicated device that or a piece of software or platform that is difficult to engage with. So those two are very tightly kind of looked at. And I think as you're going to start seeing companies and startups kind of being able to deliver on profitability, you're going to see ease of use start to kind of rise up and be a differentiator. That's why companies like Apple, they make it so easy for you to use the device. Companies that are selling into farms need to make it easy to use. You don't have time to be doing a 10-week program to learn how to use something. So okay.
Yes, all right, so I've got a question from the audience actually, John. So I've got actually a number of questions from the audience. What crops will lend themselves best to vertical farming?
I think it'll be specialty crops, kind of more of the high value, crops. Today you're seeing more leafy greens. It's going to be tough for vertical farms to make money out of leafy greens. So their transition into berries, tomatoes, I think that will be the niche. And I don't think it's going to be suddenly, a big shift over to everything is going to be in a vertical farm. I think we already have a demand supply gap, and I think it's going to solve that. And also there are areas around the world that you can grow, and I think it's going to be able to help grow in areas, whether it's in the Middle East or areas like that might adopt controlled environment farming maybe even earlier than here.
Okay, so then a question from Reading University, from Tamazan. How do you feel about DIY tech such as Raspberry PIs and Arduinos?
Yeah, that's a good question. Farmers are comfortable, working and being, how would I say, creative in terms of, being able to kind of either create something themselves or build something out. I think the problem with that is when you're building and running a business at scale, you need to have platforms that are enterprise ready, platforms that are robust, that are not going to have problems down the road. So I think that the technologies that will be adopted will be technologies that have a very strong base in terms of its technology and its ability to be able to scale. Maybe with some of the smaller farms, some of these kind of devices might be useful, but I think that it's going to have to be cost effective, and it's also going to have to be able to scale with a farm.
Okay. What percentage of the startups in Thrive are high value crop versus broad acre?
Oh, I don't know if I can even answer that question because we got so many. I would say that there's definitely more of these companies pointed at specialty crops first because of, there's more economics there to try and do it. I would say it's probably 60-40. A lot of what we have in the irrigation side, our companies in the farm management side are very applicable, to row crop for sure. Robotics automation is a little bit, more focused on specialty crop right now. But I'd say in a couple of years' time, you're going to see that transition over.
Okay. What are the pricing models your technology companies are using most? Is it licensing or subscription?
Yeah, it's subscription. And, like if I was a farmer, I wouldn't feel comfortable. Well, this happens today, but having to buy a bunch of equipment, stick it in the fields, whether it's sensors and then having a software and then having to pay whatever, 100 grand or 50 grand or whatever it is, like that's not a sustainable model. If the startup is basically being able to deal with the cost and provide the service to the farmer and reduce the cost, that's going to be the win-win. And that's what we're seeing more of these business models, come out. And likewise, in robotics automation, it's a similar thing, so I would say subscription is probably the top of the list.
Alrighty, and then when will farmers be able to monetize their data instead of always being a data buyer?
Yeah, I mean, that's a $64 million question. I think that now that you're seeing more of the bigger kind of players, come in, whether it's, the likes of a Google, they have capabilities to be able to monetize this. I would say we're still a couple of years away from this. I also think that I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be more regulation going to come in place in terms of data in this space. I mean, I hate saying it, but it's a little bit of the Wild West at the moment in terms of just this data in fields. And it's going to take a combination of some regulation combined with some maybe bigger new entrants that are big companies that have the ability to be able to monetize this for farms. But I still feel it's a couple of years away until it actually is meaningful for farmers.
Alrighty, and then we're probably at the last question, John. If you could put your clairvoyant hat on, in 5, 10, or 20 years from now, what do you think the significant changes you believe are going to be in agriculture, particularly here in North America?
I mean, we've probably covered a few of these, already. I think that automation, robotics automation, I think is going to continue to be a big trend. You're not going to see robots walking around the fields, but I think you're going to see a whole cluster of different tools and equipment that is going to support the farmer. I think the second thing is this point that we talked about earlier in terms of, the digitization or, the ability to be able to have data to manage, your business. I think it's going to be a situation where farmers are not going to feel uncomfortable either sharing data. It's going to be protected, and that will actually make us more productive in the end. And so I think we're going to get over that hump over the next couple of years. And I think it's going to provide more value to the farmers in terms of, what inputs they're using, how they're able to control and manage their business. So I think data is going to play a big role. Think about it like the Google for data. We didn't think about that 20 years ago when it didn't exist, but it's going to be very impactful. So I think kind of data, robotic automation, and then the control environment, control environment or vertical farming, is very much at its infancy. And I see that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, probably more on the specialty crop area, but I think that's going to be, a significant business in 5 years' time.
Okay, I said it was the last question, John, but I have one other comment from Stephen that I'm going to kind of move into a question. We talked a lot about adoption. Many of the farmers in Canada are older farmers. They're the average age of a farmer in Canada is about 50 to 60. Many would argue that to be a farmer younger, or to enter as a young farmer in Canada today is probably cost prohibitive. I guess there's question, can the older farmers adapt quickly enough to all of the technology? So any thoughts there? Any thoughts on how that maybe there's a gap in the demographics that's going to slow down the adoption of technology? Yeah.
Well, 50 something isn't that old. I'm in that category. So, never say never. You can always learn. I think that it's a real world environment insofar as farmers and farm families have been farming for generations. They're choosing to make this is their passion, this is their life. It's not kind of like some economic equation. Now, obviously, economics always have a play, but they're doing it with their heart, and that's not going to change. I think what will help them, the easier it is to use some of this technology, the cheaper that technology is to be able to adopt. I think that's going to be a bigger issue rather than having a farmer learn how to use it. Farmers will learn if they're going to save money. If you're going to save 20% irrigation, they will figure it out. So I'm not too worried about that. But I think the next generation, you know, I think this is an area that, you know, as a dad myself, we need to make sure that the next generation is equipped and is pointed in the right direction in terms of technology that can actually benefit, you know, the farm and the business going forward as well. It's a, you know, it's a little bit of a philosophical one. You know, farmers do what they do because this is what they've done. Their families are going to do it. That's not going to change. And if they can save money, I guarantee you they'll figure it out.
All right, perfect. So with that, we will wrap it up. Again, I'll just mention to everybody that we have posted the Thrive pitch information in the session. There's a document you can download there. We've also posted links. So I just wanted to mention that before we wrap up. John has agreed to stay around for the next half hour or so. So if you want to chat with him in the networking session in FeedLoop, he'll just have to switch out of Zoom to get into FeedLoop. He'll be around in the networking if you want to reach out to him. I know many of you have been, you know, very engaged in this presentation. So if you want to chat with John, he has agreed to chat in the networking session. So with that, we will thank everyone very much and remind you that our next sessions, we have a series of breakout sessions. There's 3 different ones going on. So please join us in another 15 minutes for those. Thanks very much, everyone.